Hey guys, I want to talk about state management in React and I want to compare the built-in way of managing state between a child, parent, and a grandparent versus doing it with a state management library, in this case, RTK query. I got into it because we use it at extent and we are going through the boot camp for our UI and I got interested. So I had to break it down and try to understand what it's all about. So here I have a component. It's quite simple. It starts with an initial state, and as soon as we hit update state, it's going to give this fixed message. So what we want is we want this state to reflect at its parent, and then so if you look at the parent, right? As soon as we hit update state, let's go over there and run that test, and we're going to comment out the click of that button. So it says hello from parent, hello from child. As soon as we hit update state, it's going to pass that state from the child up to the parent. And in turn, it's also going to do the exact same thing at the grandparent. So let's comment this out, go to the grandparents. I'll see all three. So hello from grandparent, hello from parent, hello from child. And then as soon as we hit update state, all of them updates. So doing this is not that exactly simple in React. It's very easy to manage state as props are coming into your component and then you're displaying that data. And it's very easy to update the state, but it's not super simple to keep passing that state around, right, to a parent, to a grandparent, or sideways. So here's how that's done in this simple example. So we have the child, and it has its initial state of hello from child. And as soon as we click the button at the child, let's run that test. We set our own state, but we also want to push that state up to the parent. And how do we do that? Well, the child takes a property called onChild state change. And what that is that gets controlled at the parent. So onChild state change. That gets controlled by a callback. That callback gets fully controlled by the parent. So think of this as a gateway from the parent via passing a callback via a prop to enable acquisition of the state from the child into the parent. So what happens then is as soon as we push that state up with on child state change, right, that gets passed up via the callback and then it gets updated right at the parent as we set our own state. But here we also push it one more state up into the grandparent. So we look at the grandparent right up here. No more passing state up from there, but this, you see the same pattern. We are using the prop on parent state change, and then we're passing that callback. And within that callback, as soon as that one fires, we are setting our own state. So it's not that simple, right? It's yeah, you get it. Like once you see child, parent, and grandparent, you get it. But this will get quite hectic at scale. So that's why you have all these state management libraries in React. And one of them is RTK query. So I like to think of RTK query as the latest, greatest Redux. Um, it improved so much over the years and a lot of complexities have been abstracted. So let us start easy. We'll start easy and just compare the grandparent of in RTK query to the grandparent in our traditional approach on the right side. So let's just delete these comments. This is wall of text explaining to myself how it's all working. So we were using use state within the component, we're just maintaining the state within the component, which is great. That's what you should be doing. But we are also relying on some state that's coming from this parent component. And we had to use a prop and a callback to acquire that state and do something with it. And here you see that we're using this thing called use selectors. There's some states somewhere, right? And then we're acquiring our own state from there, not from the child. So we are getting it from a common place called store. And who updated that state somewhere? We don't know. But if this state, this value, grandparent state, had an initial value and someone updated something in the store, and we'll always get that up to date value. Now, if we look at the parent, right, if you compare the usual parent to the RTK query version of things, so I'll just put it right here. So here's grandparent, here's parent. Again, you see that the version on the left side, the RTK query, all it's doing is just getting that value from the store and then displaying it, right? These two components are almost identical. But you also see this complexity that, hey, this parent doesn't really have to pass this state to the great grandparent, right? It's still, again, just getting it from the store. So you see this code being a lot more shorter. And how is that possible? So let's just close the grandparent and then close this guy too. And then we'll look at the child. So we'll look at the child as the traditional way. So that one is like the parent, right? Because it's passing up state to the parent, and the parent is also passing to the grandparent. Let's look at what it's doing in RTK query. So the first sentence here is the same all around, right? We're just getting the child state from the store. That part works the same, but we have the ability to dispatch in this component. We are dispatching a state, and we are using that to utilize the set child state, set grandparent state. So you've been seeing these setters in these parents, but now they are coming from our store. And then we're dispatching these actions to ourselves, to the parent, and then to the grandparent. So the only long-ish code is at this child now, where we are changing the state, but we are changing the state at the store, and then everything else is getting that state from store, right? And here is config for that store, real quick. Just delete this part. So what is going on in the store? A type, an initial state. So think of this as the initial state of that was being managed within the components themselves. So hello from parent, hello from grandparent. So matching those. And you have these reducers, and think of these as setters, right? They take the current state and they take an action. So in this case, the action will be hello from child updated, right? So this is just going to be a string. And what's going to happen is if, let's say, set grandparent state is called, it's going to take that string hello from child and then set grandparent state to hello from child. And it's going to make a copy of the state and present a new one so that all the other components can go and acquire from there. And you'll see some syntax here and there. That's just RTK query specific. You may have so many slices. So this is called a slice. So you might have separate states of different groups of components. And then at the end, you have this mega store that's composed of all these different slices. But that's the main idea, right? And you see how that you have the one-time store complexity, okay, but afterwards, it does make the components a lot more concise. So you can see the benefits of doing it at scale. Obviously, always try to keep the managing state of the component to itself if it doesn't have to share it with anyone. If it's just a parent, of course, you can pass it one up, but usually the approach is all the state, we like to put it um, into a state manager, right? So the way I was able to really understand it was in the built-in way of things. I wrote the component test, and then I just had to make the component test work with the RTK query version of things just to make sure, and then just delete all the code that I wasn't using. And if you compare the component test, right, let's put RTK query version over here and regular version over here, right? So in the regular version, we had to have a prop, right? We don't need that prop because we're not passing, say, from this child to the parent. That's one difference. And on the RTK query version, similar to Redux, like this is the same thing. You are wrapping it with a provider and a store. And if we had an app component somewhere, a main component, so the usual regular application, we'd be wrapping also our application with a provider and that store. So it's really the same thing. Um, Other than that, the only thing we're not doing is that we don't have to ensure that that state change is called because it's just going to the store. So you could argue that, yeah, maybe you don't even need this, but it's just a one-liner. That's fine. Because if you don't have that, really, like the tests are identical. So again, this comes to the idea that you don't really want to test too much of the implementation details. You should be able to just change your state management and things just work the same way. So for instance, if we weren't using RTK query, but something else, most likely the only thing that would change, for instance, context API, I'm pretty sure the only thing that we'd have to change is how we are wrapping this component, and the rest of the test in all of them would be the same. So that it is comparison of state management and verifying it all with component tests. And in the future, I'll probably be adding different flavors of state management as I'm finding out more. You will find this code in the Cypress React component test examples. And if you look under the Cypress folder, usually I don't put anything under Cypress folder, but this is not related to that. These are just a la carte examples. They'll be under state management. So just built in right now, and then there's RTK query. And as I compare more of them, I'll just put them here side by side. They'll be much easier to understand for everyone. That's all. Thanks.